Hello, and welcome to this week's Bible study. I like to start all Bible studies with the deep breathing exercise, so if you wouldn't mind doing that with me really quick, or not really quick, but quick as breathing exercises go. We're just going to do 3 deep breaths, so we're going to do that now. So deep breath in, deep breath out, in. I need to get back into yoga. But fantastic, we did the deep breathing. Now, after deep breathing, I like to play a quiet worship song to continue to try to get us into that meditative headspace. Mike's not pointing at me. Point at me, Mike. It is very precariously placed on the tripod right now. So, I'm trying to. There we go. Yeah. This probably sounds terrible. Okay, that's close enough. Anyways, after quiet worship, after breathing, I like to do quiet worship and just like to play this like a quiet worship song that you can kind of like meditate on, listen to the lyrics, or like reflect on the lyrics, or maybe quietly sing them to yourself, maybe continue your deep breathing, whatever gets you in that headspace. I recommend doing that. Now, I can't actually play the video because of copyright reasons, but if you go into the description, you will find pretty close up to the top a link for a quiet worship song, and you should click on that and then do that whole thing, and then when you're done, you come back and then you just you watch the rest of the video as you would. So I would recommend doing that, and you can do that. You can pause the video and do it right now. And you're back. Hello. I hope that was pleasant for you. So after worship, I like to do a quick prayer for the Bible study. It's just like a pre-written one, and it's the same every time, but I think it gets us in that mindset. I got nothing against written prayers, just it's how you use them. We're gonna do that now. So, God, thank you for bringing us all here tonight. Please guide my tongue and heart during this teaching, and guide everyone during the discussion and prayer time. Help us to be a reflection of your light by enlightening us to your ways with love, patience, and curiosity. We love you, God. Help us to love each other like you love us. In your name we pray. Amen. All right, so let's get into the Bible study. And before we do, let me just say, wow, I am so exhausted right now. My county that I live in had an election yesterday, and I volunteered to work the polls like a fool. And so for the past 2 days, I've gotten a total of 5 hours of sleep per day. Plus, this chapter in particular just happens to ask a lot of hard to answer questions, so my brain's a little fried right now. So apologies if this one is a little bit jankier than usual. So let's just dive in, figure it out as we go, okay? I'm more honest than I should be sometimes, I think.
Yeah, me too, honey.
It's to a fault, honest to a fault.
Yeah.
So So Genesis 18 of the New King James Version starts. Then the Lord appeared to him by the terebinth trees of Mamre, however you say that, as he was sitting in the tent door in the heat of the day. So, to start with, there doesn't seem to be much significance for terebinth trees of Mamre, except to establish a setting. Terebinth trees are a type of oak tree. They're these big bushy things, just in case you were wondering. And Mamre is the place in Canaan that Abraham settled in and would eventually be buried in. Thousands of years later, some random Palestinian Orthodox church is going to claim that they house the very trees mentioned here specifically. And sure, maybe, but I don't think there's any real way to prove that. but go off, I guess. Anyways, I just quick setting the stage note. So let's see what happens next after I adjust my camera slightly lower. There we go. Okay. So he, Abraham, lifted his eyes and looked, and behold, 3 men were standing by him. And when he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them, and bowed himself to the ground, and said, My Lord, if I have found now favor in your sight, do not pass on by your servant. Please let a little water be brought, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree. And I will bring a morsel of bread, that you may refresh your hearts. And after that you may pass by, inasmuch as you have come to your servant. And they said, Do as you have said. So, Abraham seems to immediately recognize, it's too low now. Yeah, okay. Seems to immediately recognize God, or at least pretty quickly sees that it's God and the crew. It's hard to say why this is. Either God came to him in the same form as previous times, or it was just some kind of spiritual intuition. Mia, who's on the bed, who grew up around Jewish traditions, she informed me that some denominations recognize the Trinity in the Old Testament, and if I'm remembering correctly, these
specifically
these 3 men
views and perceives the Trinity as what I told you.
It's
in the Torah.
Yes. And if I'm remembering, that these 3 men were considered a depiction of that.
Yes. The God, God's Spirit, and God's wisdom.
Yeah. And of course, in Judaism, Jesus is not considered to be part of the Trinity. Instead, as Mia said, the parts were called God's Word, Spirit, and Wisdom. So that was what's considered to be the Trinity in the Old Testament, according to Jewish believers. Of course, Christian tradition dictates it was God and 2 angels, but I suppose it doesn't really change the story much either way. Someone from God's camp went to check out Sodom and helped in the judgment process, and I don't think it's impossible for God to split himself into 3 physical beings. I do think that the language that I'm looking at implies more God and 2 angels, but who knows? It's just an interesting thing to consider.
His authority on his behalf.
Yeah, it's whatevers. But yeah, regardless.
That's how it rolls.
Yeah, it's whatevs. But either way, Abraham offered them that great hospitality that permeates many Middle Eastern cultures, so that was nice. So let's take a look at how Abe treated his divine guests. So Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah and said, he didn't say quickly, he said, Quickly, make ready 3 measures of fine meal, knead it, and make cakes. And Abraham ran to the herd, took a tender and good calf, gave it to a young man, and hastened to prepare it. So he took butter and milk and the calf which he had prepared, and set it before them. And he stood by them under the tree as they ate. So a couple things to consider for the scene. One, and this is just off the top of my head that I was thinking of as I was reading this. So you kind of see Abraham, he got his wife to make some cakes, and he got a calf to also give to God. And I thought that was kind of interesting just because, just because of like the whole sacrifice tradition, you're supposed to give God meat and burnt offerings. You sacrifice living things for God, and here you're just seeing him, he's just eating it normally, but that's kind of the mindset you're kind of given for sacrifices. Like you're making food for God, but here Abraham is literally making food for God. So I don't know, that was just interesting for me. But another thing, even though they were rushing around, they were still in ancient Near East making food from scratch, so it probably took at least a couple hours to prepare, and God's just like waiting under a nearby tree like that whole time. I'm kind of wondering if anyone else approached them since they were apparently pretty close to the tent and where all of these people were. So I'm wondering if anybody else like approached them and like chatted them up, or if they just like kind of kept their distance because they can kind of tell, like, ooh, that's someone that's powerful, and we're very intimidated by them. It's certainly something that strikes at the imagination. It's also interesting that Abraham and Sarah involved themselves in the preparation of the food instead of just making the servants do it for them, because they do have a lot of servants, in fact, and they couldn't just like make them do that and like going to and just focus on entertaining the guests, just being with God. Possibly this is because it's something that this important, just felt like it needed their careful attention. It also just reminds me a bit of the story of Mary and Martha when Jesus came to visit. Martha, hustled around trying to make the house pretty and prepare the food, while Mary just like sat with Jesus and just listened to him talk. Jesus very famously lets Martha know that she needs to just chill and just like be with him as Mary is. All the prep isn't as important as him. And I'm wondering if you're meant to get the same message from this, or if it's more about doing things for God yourself instead of letting other people handle it for you. I don't think there's a clear answer for this, but it's fun to muse about. Anyway, let's see what happens when Abraham finally comes and sits with them to discuss things. Then they said to him, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" So he said, "Here, in the tents." And he said, "I will certainly return to you according to the time of life, and behold, Sarah your wife shall have a son." Sarah was listening in the tent door, which was behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, well advanced in their age, and Sarah had passed the age of childbearing. Therefore Sarah laughed within herself, saying, "After I have grown old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord being old also?" So here we see that Sarah isn't pregnant yet, which means this event couldn't have happened more than 3 months from the last chapter's event, where God told Abraham that Sarah would have a son in a year. Probably God is repeating himself just as a reminder and a confirmation for Sarah, and I just want to make the setting clear here as well. So Abraham and the three beings are outside by a tree, and Sarah is like just inside the tent listening in on the conversation. And I'm not totally sure why Sarah isn't with them. Maybe she's shy, maybe it's some kind of like patriarchal etiquette nonsense. Women can't be around strangers or men or something like that. It's hard to say if she's expected to be listening in and staying hidden, or if this is like considered like a sneaky eavesdropping. A lot of commentators say that she was eavesdropping and shouldn't have. Sorry, I'm losing my place a little bit. Eavesdropping, so she shouldn't be listening in on men who are discussing things, even if it's about her. I'm personally not sure how they came to that conclusion. God starts by asking where Sarah is, and Abraham says that she's in the tent, so they know that she's there. And God asking in the first place makes me think that he wants her to hear what he's saying, or at the very least wants to openly acknowledge her presence. So I'm not sure we can conclusively say Sarah was being sneaky or not. Another important note is Sarah laughed to herself and thought about how crazy what God was saying in her head. Like, it was just a thought that she was thinking. And I want to be sure we know this because it's important for the next part, which is, "And the Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh, saying, shall I surely bear a child since I am old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the appointed time I will return to you according to the time of life, and Sarah shall have a son." But Sarah denied it, saying, "I did not laugh," for she was afraid. And he said, "No, but you did laugh." So this is probably one of the more interesting exchanges in the chapter. We start with God flexing his mind reading abilities, which is hilarious. But notice also how God doesn't call out Sarah directly, but asks Abraham about it first. And I really wanted to know, like for me, I wanted to know why that was, but I couldn't super find a comprehensive explanation for it. Maybe it was just like I said, the etiquette of the time. Strange men shouldn't talk directly to other men's wives if they weren't spoken to directly by them first. Maybe God was being coy, simultaneously calling out Sarah's thoughts, but also poking fun at Abraham, who reacted the same way when he told him about Isaac. Two birds in one lull, as it were. Or maybe it was just like a little bit more serious, God trying to make a point to Sarah that he can read minds. So, what else can he do? Is making a woman pregnant really beyond his ability? And he talked to Abraham instead of her about it to give her a sense of what feels like, to not be addressed directly when you doubt someone. Give her a taste of her own medicine. Sarah wasn't being direct with her doubts, so God wasn't being direct with calling her out. And it wasn't until she spoke directly to him that he responded to her directly. So I feel like this is the strongest possibility, and it makes for a good lesson. Be upfront about your doubts because you can't hide them from God. You also don't have to be scared to tell the truth to God. Your truth in this matter. He already knows how you feel, and he hasn't punished you for it yet. He didn't punish Sarah beyond some kind of embarrassment. He just states factual statements, then moves on, which I guess to some is still pretty devastating. Truth hurts sometimes. Other commentators do in fact see this as a harsher scene than I do. They say that because Sarah doubted, God put her in her place. Some go further and say Sarah doubted more than Abraham did, so God was extra rude to her about it. I don't really see a difference between how Sarah and Abraham reacted or how God responded beyond that Sarah tried hiding her doubt and denied it when asked. In both cases, God simply just restated the facts. He might have prodded Sarah a bit more since she wasn't upfront about her doubts as Abraham was, but I don't read it in a very harsh tone. If anything, it was, it feels like more of a mock annoyance. I feel like God would understand why a human couple with limited spiritual understanding who's pushing 100 and doesn't have access to a Bible chronicling the great feats that God had accomplished, he would understand why they would doubt. We're only human. I think it's less about the doubt and more how they deal with it. So Sarah hid it and even lied when she was called out. Probably out of fear, as the verse states. But God didn't get all indignant and say, "How dare Sarah think that I can't do what I say, and now she's lying about it, curse her." Instead, he just asks, why is she doubting, and reminds her of his power. And I think because she didn't bring this doubt to God, he asked her husband instead of her, which caused her to panic and come to him directly. He kind of forced her to come to him directly. But even when she did, she lied about laughing, and instead of humbling herself and conceding to God, she moved out of fear instead of taking the opportunity to be honest and talk it out with God. But God didn't validate her fear by striking her down when she just kept not being upfront about it. Instead, he just told her the truth. She did laugh, and he let her just sit with that. When that whole drama with that happened with Hagar happened, Sarah blamed Abraham for listening to her instead of herself for bringing it up in the first place. Clearly, Sarah isn't the type Sarah is the type who doesn't like to be in the wrong. So God took the time to keep her from gaslighting him. I think the most striking thing is all he did was tell her what she did. That's all that it was, and that's all that it will be. Like, just be honest about what's happening here, and consider your part in this, because she usually doesn't. Admitting it won't make it any worse. The predicament you put yourself in and the reflection after the fact is punishment enough. God won't get mad at you for admitting it. It's actually good that you do, because admitting is the first step towards redemption. He's not going to let you lie about it either, though. So just be honest with God. It's safe to do so, and you can reach a deeper understanding of God if you do. Otherwise, all God can do for you is tell you what you did and wait for you to come to terms with it, and accept that, yeah, you messed up, and you just gotta move on. But fun fact, before we move on from this part, the Hebrew word for hard is in this verse is the same used for wonderful. So the verse could read, "Nothing is too hard or wonderful for God." And I just like the implication that hard things can produce wonderful things. Like, it's all interconnected. It's just a nice imagery for me. Anyways, that's it for Sarah's nonsense. Let's see what happened after this exchange. Then the men rose from there and looked toward Sodom, and Abraham went with them to send them on their way. And the Lord said, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I am doing? Since Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. For I have known him in order that he may command his children and his household after him, that they keep the way of the Lord, to do righteousness and justice, that the Lord may bring to Abraham what he has spoken to him." And the Lord said, "Because of the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grave, I will go down now and see whether they have done altogether according to the outcry against it that has come to me, and if not, I will know." So here, God is asking himself a rhetorical question, kind of in front of Abraham, just to help us understand his thought process better. He already knows the answer, but God often does unnecessary things just for the sake of giving us the opportunity to understand him better and to be involved or informed in his workings. So here he's showing us that he wants to let Abraham know that he's about to judge Sodom and Gomorrah, partially to show Abe the extent of his powers and the responsibility he has to the earth, to be a good God that judges the wicked, just put the fear of God in him, and partially to help Abraham practice his intercession abilities. He is going to be the father of God's people, after all, so knowing how to communicate and sway God for the sake of others will be handy later. So we should also take a moment to point out that we don't know for sure what Sodom and Gomorrah did, but the implication in later chapters seems to revolve around things like murder and greed, possibly some human sacrifice and sexual perversion in the name of false gods. There's something really awful and demonic. An unfortunate amount of Christians think it was solely because of the amount of gay people that lived there. I strongly disagree with that, and I think the evidence for it is weak, but we'll get into that next week when we tackle the behemoth of Genesis 19. The thing that I want to mention here is the fact that there was apparently a great outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah, and the question is from whom? Where is this outcry coming from? If it was from the victims within Sodom, that could imply innocent people, but there likely wasn't, since the city got destroyed and only Lot and his family seemed to be worth saving. Maybe the victims were from the surrounding plundered villages, or maybe the victims were also the perpetrators, got some gang on gang violence, and most scholars lean towards these two possibilities. I think, but there's also a chance it wasn't from people directly affected by Sodom. Maybe the angels or God's own sense of omnipresent justice was pained by the situation. Possibly even nature itself was being affected by whatever unnatural thing they were doing. Hard to say. But like I said, most people lean towards it was actually people being upset and actually being hurt. It definitely was people being hurt, because that was the main thing. It was just who was being hurt is the question. But it's one of those things. It's another one of those things that's fun to wonder about. Another quick note is that God didn't have to go to Sodom directly, or even send these angels to judge them accurately. He's an omnipresent, all-knowing God. It's really more for our benefit that he sends anyone at all. So we feel like we got a fair trial by having a physical inspector there before any official condemnation. It also works to set us up to show how we act by example. It keeps us from being able to protest, saying, come on, give us a chance to prove ourselves at least, because a chance was already given. God could just plow through and randomly smite bad people as he sees fit, but then we'd feel a way about it. At least give us a chance. So he gives us a warning trial to prove to us whatever he does is justified. So that's enough on that. Let's now find out how Abraham did with his intercession in the next verse. So then the men turned away from there and went toward Sodom. But Abraham still stood before the Lord, and Abraham came near and said, "Would you also destroy the righteous with the wicked? Suppose there are 50 righteous within the city. Would you destroy the place and not spare it for the 50 righteous that were in it? Far be it from you to do such things as this, to slay the righteous with the wicked, so that the righteous should be as the wicked. Far be it from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth do right?" Oh, real quick. What Abraham is trying to do is he's trying to sway God through intercession. He's trying to convince God not to do something, or to do something, which in this case is not to do something. Now, we don't know if God already planned on saving Sodom if there were a certain amount of righteous people living there, but Abraham doesn't know that either. He just knows Sodom has a lot of bad people in it, and God is about to judge it, and he pities them. So he is trying to make sure Sodom has the best chance for survival by asking God how many good people are worth it to save the bad ones. I lost my place again. I should probably make this text bigger, but you won't try to make the chances. I think a lot of Christians have a passive relationship with God. They pray things like, "Your will be done, God knows best," and that's not a wrong statement. But consider also that God wants to consider you in his actions also. This is a relationship, and relationships are two-way streets, even if one side is perfect and all-knowing. That's why God lets Abraham know his plans, and he agrees to deals that give a chance at a lighter sentence. God doesn't want to just be in charge of everything and have you do whatever he says and put up with whatever he does, even if what he does is all right. It's nothing's morally wrong with it. He wants you to contribute to the process and events as much as he can allow. He values your thoughts and opinions. He's not so insecure as to get mad at you every time you question his actions and ask him to not do something that he's doing. He wants to discuss it with you, and if you make reasonable demands, he will be faithful to them, and he will consider them, and it can sway him. Of course, if they aren't, for whatever reason, they just completely wackadoodle, not reasonable, he has final say. But as long as you can accept his all-knowing judgment over your own kind of knowing judgment, there's no harm in asking. So don't be scared to ask. Abraham also follows protocol by getting close to God before asking him if he will destroy innocent people and trying to sway him away from doing that. So here Abraham is physically getting close to God, but we don't usually have that option, so we have to get a little bit more creative, often through meditation or worship music. The best way to get close to God, though, is to study the Bible and learn about his character. Try to understand him as a being, as a conscious being. You see Abraham use a similar tactic here, where he notes that God is a righteous being and wouldn't do anything bad, and he just knows that from his relationship with God. But it still helps to show God that we understand this much about him, and how can he justify this if he is doing this. So God answers this question specifically in regards to Sodom in this last section, which is, so the Lord said, if I find Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare all the place for their sakes. Then Abraham answered, indeed, now I, who am but dust and ashes, have taken it upon myself to speak to the Lord. But suppose there were 5 less than the 50 righteous. Would you destroy all the city for lack of 5? So he said, if I find there are 45, I will not destroy it. And he spoke to him yet again and said, suppose there should be 40 found there. So he said, I will not do it for the sake of 40. Then he said, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak. Suppose 30 should be found there. So he said, I will not do it if I find 30 there. And he said, indeed, now I have taken it upon myself to speak to the Lord, but suppose 20 should be found there. So he said, I will not destroy it for the sake of 20. And he said, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak once more. Suppose 10 should be found there. And he said, I will not destroy it for the sake of 10. So the Lord went his way as soon as he had finished speaking with Abraham, and Abraham returned to his place. Okay, so this sounds like some extreme haggling with God, but it's actually some fascinating theological processing with God trying to answer the question, if God is righteous, would he punish the innocent? Is this like a numbers thing? Like, what's the cutoff here? And Abe wasn't even primarily concerned with Lot, who lived there, or else he would say, get Lot out first before you judge them. He genuinely thought, as we all would, there has to be at least a handful of people that make the city worth saving. Like, it's statistically speaking, there has to be someone there, or 10, there has to be at least 10 people in that city. Excuse me. And God agrees to these terms, but even though God said he'd destroy the city if there were less than 10, he still got the innocent out of Dodge. Only 4 as far as we can tell. Possibly there were others that he got out that weren't mentioned here, but I do wonder if that's guaranteed. And let's consider if there were innocent people that didn't get saved from Sodom. And this is going to get morbid, by the way. We're gonna be getting into talks of like death and suicide, so trigger warning for that. If you don't want to hear about it, I'm gonna leave a timestamp for you, so for when we stop talking about it. So click on that now. But maybe there were some innocents that he let die with the city, because after the hell that they lived through, only heaven could make up for it. The kind of trauma a city like Sodom could cause would be hard to live with, hard to heal from, especially in those ancient times with no therapists. So maybe a quick, clean death is a form of God's mercy. People tend to want to live, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's great. You should want to live. That's the preference. But there's others who only ever wait for the end to come. And of course, they shouldn't bring that end themselves, but sometimes God gives them an early leave of absence for their troubles. And I think we can better trust when God decides to end us, because it means we have fulfilled whatever specific purpose that we were put here for. We can die in peace. Now, everyone dies eventually, but the goal is that you die at the right time, which only God would know about. So if you want to die, but you are not dead yet, probably you haven't done the thing that you were supposed to do first. So perhaps you should focus on figuring that out instead of trying to rush out. I understand the impatience, though. Living is difficult. It's especially difficult if you're suicidal, because you don't know what you're meant to do with your life. My recommendation is, if that's the case, find someone who needs help. Maybe it's just some random hobo, or like a kid, or like an elderly person, or just any person really. It could even be like an animal, or some community project that needs to be done, like a cleanup or a fix up. Whatever strikes your fancy, whatever catches your eye. Find something that needs you, because low key, our general purpose for like humanity generally, the reason for living, the meaning of life, is simply to love. You can't love by yourself, so find someone or something to love that needs your help. And like that's how I've kind of managed it from when I get those suicidal thoughts. So maybe that helps you. But if not, I also highly recommend talking to a mental health professional about it. Finding some way to contribute to society can be exhausting sometimes when you're in that headspace. And a good therapist makes it less hard, I think. So I'm going to link some resources below to help you with that. But really, back to the text. This is all based on the speculation that there were innocent people in Sodom, which, as far as the text reads, there were not. But it just made me think about other more natural things that can kill people, good or bad. And that's a hard thing to come to terms with. But I hope it's understood that living on Earth isn't really the goal as much as it is just the journey. It's not the destination, it's the journey kind of a thing. Like, it's not even that great if we're being honest, and everyone stops being alive eventually. So perhaps we shouldn't cling to life so tightly. Life is still a gift. It's our chance to choose to really explore the freedoms of ourselves and kind of discover ourselves independent of anyone else. And it can also be a chance to help others choose. But if God takes away life, then we have to trust that the final choice was made. God is a perfect judge after all. So for Sodom, they did make their choice, and their deaths were useful in showing what happens when you choose wrong. If you hurt people too much, there's like a threshold. At a certain point, if you hurt people too much, God will prevent you from hurting anyone ever again. And that's just a fact of life that we shouldn't ignore. God doesn't just forgive blindly so you can do whatever you want. There will be consequences if you forge a path of destruction. So don't be a dick to other people, okay? Not only is it wrong, but it could backfire a lot. If not in this life, the next. So you want to follow God out of love, not fear. But Christians are human, and sometimes they need a stick for incentive instead of a carrot. So for those who need a stick, don't be like Sodom, or else. So yeah, that's it for that. So welcome back, timestamp skippers. I hope you're okay. I really do. But let's end this on a positive note. Yeah. So Abe ended up holding his own for this. I think it was the first intercessionary interaction with God. He didn't just ask God to not smite Sodom at all and then be all I did it all. I did all I could, so it's up to God now. He was specific in asking the amount of innocence required to save Sodom. Knowing God was merciful, he persisted until he got it down to what he thought was a reasonable number. He also remained humble, making it clear he knows he's being naggy, but he's not questioning his judgment on Sodom either. He safely assumes God has an accurate idea of Sodom, but he'd rather try to prevent their deserved punishment if possible. Even deserved punishment can tug at our human anxieties and empathies. And this is exactly the kind of mindset that God wanted to draw out of Abraham, besides just wanting him to be involved in the decision-making process. This persistence for leniency on a lot of people, trying to get him to be empathetic for people, even if they suck. This will serve Abraham well when he has to raise up people that will also soon have to contend with God's wrath due to their own iniquities. God wanted there to be a written example of how to pray like lives depended on it, because they do. And God agrees to Abraham's terms, though there is a wonder if God cut Abraham off at 10, or if Abe thought 10 was doable and didn't want to push it further. It's hard to say, but it's definitely a vibe setter, depending. Either God prevented giving more than would get in the way of his destructive plan, or Abraham was too confident in Lot's influence in Sodom, or just not confident enough in his ability to badger further. I'm not sure it really matters, though, if we're assuming God spared everyone who was redeemable regardless, and as far as we can tell, that is what happened. But it does make you wonder if God would have left Sodom alone if Abraham had gotten it down to what it actually was, which is 1 or 4 people. I'm not sure it would be a huge accomplishment to save Sodom. They were truly terrible people. Even God, who is very patient and forgiving, even he was done with them. But for other situations, it makes you wonder, what would happen if you dared to ask for the extreme? And on that open-ended question, we shall end this week's study. So let's move on to prayer requests. Yes. So we got a few this time. So an update on my cousin who got hospitalized because of COVID. He did unfortunately pass. So he's leaving behind a wife and an 11-year-old son. Yeah, it's unfortunate. It's very sad. I grew up with him when I was a kid. You know, he was like kind of a roommate when we like had it when my parents were together, and then when they got divorced, my dad moved in with them in some other house, so they were like kind of always there, and it's definitely weird. That's the best word I can come up. It's weird to think that he's not around anymore, and we definitely feel very bad for his wife and son. So we're going to be praying that they can get through that in one piece. Well, maybe not one piece, a different piece. I hope it doesn't hurt them too bad. I also, kind of on that note, for those of you who like listen regularly to this, Dr. Heiser and Trey both have some serious health issues currently as well. Dr. Heiser and Trey, as you know, they are the hosts of the Naked Bible podcast, which I frequently reference in my Bible studies whenever I haven't had a chance lately because they don't talk about the things that I'm talking about currently. But when we get to Exodus, they did a whole series on Exodus, so I'm going to be referencing them very heavily when we get to Exodus. But Dr. Heiser got diagnosed with cancer, and Trey also got COVID. They both seem like they have a pretty good shot of making it through that, but they like, if anyone who's been listening to their podcast lately know, like, they sound pretty rough, so we're just gonna pray that they get through that, because it's kind of selfish for me. I just don't want the podcast to end because it's a good podcast, but they're very good people, and I'd hate for them to leave before they had like a lot of plans to get a lot of to push out a lot of like theological content, so I hope that they're at least able to do that. On lesser notes, my dad no longer has COVID, so that's great, but he also was in a car crash. He's fine currently, but he's starting to get like some legal troubles because of the car crash. So we're gonna just pray that it doesn't, like, this whole thing doesn't hurt him too hard financially. Also, my mother seems to be going through some like conflict of some kind. I didn't get a chance. It was just very last minute, so I didn't get like all the details. But it sounds like she's going through some kind of like conflict, trying to decide what she's supposed to do in her life, and she's obviously also grieving her cousin's death. So we're just gonna pray that she's able to like ride through that. And Mia, you had something?
I did. I don't remember writing.
I know you were you said you were depressed. You want us to pray about your depression?
Be alright. I think we just need to. Everybody seems to be in a funk.
Yeah, everyone's in a funk.
Around, and I think everybody just needs to give themselves a hug and other people around them, and that's it.
Yeah. I agree. I definitely been feeling that funk lately. I don't know why. There's just been a sludge lately, so we're just gonna pray that the sludge passes peacefully. So yeah, that's the prayer request. So we're gonna do that now. So, dear God, thank you for bringing all of these people together for this Bible study. I hope that it was helpful make it helpful for them. How about that? Yeah, God, make my words helpful to other people. I also want to pray for my cousin and her son. They're going through a very difficult grieving process right now. I just pray that you kind of help keep their heads above the waters, keep their sights set on you. It's definitely going to be very difficult for them for a while, if not forever. So I just pray that you stay with them for that, and you can give them the support that they need to get through it. Just send whatever support that they need to them, like right now. Like just give them all the love and help them feel that love. I'd also like to pray for the great hosts of the Naked Bible podcast, Dr. Heiser and Trey. I pray that he's supposed to get surgery soon, so I just pray that that surgery goes well. I pray for Trey that he gets through COVID, and it doesn't like affect his health too bad. It definitely sounds like he got the bad kind of COVID, so just pray that it's not like a permanently bad one. Just kind of get their health back to normal, or at least as close to normal as you can. We definitely do not want them to die. I feel like enough people have died, so I pray that they do not die from this, and you also keep their spirits up as they're going through that. And on lesser notes, I'd also like to pray for my dad, who just got out of a car crash, and now he's having some financial trouble with it. So I just pray that it's nothing that he can't recover from. It's nothing too devastating. I also pray for my mother, who's also kind of grieving, also going through things. I just pray that you're able to guide her through that, help her to feel all of the support and all of the wisdom that she needs right now. And I pray for not only Mia, but like everyone in general who's been going through this funk and been having a hard time just like kind of getting through the day. I just pray that it's temporary, it leaves soon, and that we can find our energy soon, and just kind of let us know if there is something that we can do to improve it, or at the very least, if there's something that we shouldn't be doing, like maybe there's something that maybe we're like putting too much on ourselves, or we're just taking too much on. So just give us a heads up that that's what's going on, and how to prevent it, and so we can recuperate and move on. But yeah, that's all the requests. I hope that you're doing well, God, and I pray that we do not remove our eyes from you, and that we're able to carry your message of hope, love, and peace throughout the week. And that is all that we can pray for. All right, thank you, and amen.
Amen.
Fantastic. So, as always,
We survived.
I know we survived.
We
So,
did, yes.
as always, if you have any questions or comments about the passage, you can also do it in general. I don't get enough comments, so really any questions or comments, let us know. If you have any prayer requests, they've been kind of sad lately, so if you have anything thankful that you just wanted to give a shout out to God for something that he did in your life recently, that'd be great. But if you also need help, that's fine too. We can pray for that. But that is about all that we have for this Bible study. I always like to end on a loud worship song. So for those watching on YouTube, if you go into the description, you're going to see a link for loud worship. And I highly recommend that you click on it and you not only listen to it, but you dance along to it. That's what the loud worship is supposed to be. You dance along, you get the endorphins running. I want to end on a high note. So do that. And I will see you guys next week. Okay, bye.